Mitsubishi Diamante 3.5 liter V6 engine, timing belt and water pump stuff. I'm afraid I've already gotten started on this to make this video. Lots of 10mm, 12mm, and 14mm bolts. All right. Let's see, where should I start? Well, this goes up here. 14mm bolts and nuts. And you can loosen that up. That's the adjusting bolt right there. You can tighten and loosen it. And it'll move the pulley up and down. There's a pulley right here, 14mm nut, loosen it up, and here's your adjuster for that. 14mm as well, and you can loosen the bolt belts. Take the belts off as they're loosened. I took that out of the way because it interferes with the timing cover. 10mm bolts in the timing cover. 21mm bolt for the crankshaft right here. A pulley that I took off for the right side, and the shield as well. It had two 12mm bolts holding it in place and some Phillips plastic screws as well. Taking out all the bolts, and you need to make sure this wire here for the crankshaft sensor is in the proper position. There's a groove here in the pulley. There's a groove here in the cover for that, and make sure it gets bolted here. And we got 14mm bolts here, 14mm nut on the alternator because we probably need to pull that off so we can get this metal bracket engine support off. I'm going to go up top now. Remove this cover here, beauty cover, 10mm bolts. So we'll just go here and take this cover off here. And we'll work to the side. Next. So get the cover out of the way with all those bolts, and it does have two fingers that fit in slots here. So be aware of that. Pulls forward a little bit. We disconnected the battery too. 10mm nut for us. I'm just going to protect it because we do need to move the alternator out of the way. Right down here is a 12mm bolt. I got the bolt out of the bottom already from below. So we get that out of the way. We need to get this bracket out of there. And we got a 12mm bolt and some 10mm bolts for the covers up on top. Just went ahead and moved it off to the side anyway. The washer fluid jug, two 10mm bolts, one here and one here. Just pulled it off out of the way. The bolts there, and 12mm bolt for the alternator. That was right there, and then we can use a pry bar or a screwdriver, and we'll move this alternator up towards the radiator, and so we can get this bracket out of there. There we go. It's out of the way. Now you should support the engine as I have. The engine is put on the jack. Took off the two nuts and bolt, 17mm right here. And then we'll take off, probably there's a bolt right here, nut and bolt set up right here. And we'll also take those off, probably also 17mm. And I did wrestle this out. Loosened a couple of 10mm bolts so this could flop around some. 12mm bracket bolt right there. It's able to get it out. Power steering hose too. So now we can maybe lower our jack a little bit, or jack it up a little bit. And get these timing covers off. Let's go around and take off the 10mm bolts. There's one tucked inside there, 10mm too. Probably a 12mm below down here as well. Let's go around here, lefty loosey, righty tighty for all bolts. So here's the cover in all its glory. with its bolt holes. And see how it fits together like a jigsaw a little bit. Just be aware of that. So at some point you'll want to line up your timing marks. You see the white painted mark on each timing gear, and then there's a groove in the back. So we just put the crankshaft bolt back in and turn it clockwise until we get our marks lined up. Now we're going to take that bracket out. You can see the alternators dropped out of the way. We got a 14mm bolt, unfortunately, going this way too. So we need to take that out. But we have some space here. We can probably get a wrench in there and take that out, or remove the alternator a little bit if we need to. So I'm just going to take these 14mm bolts out, get this bracket out of there. So you can see the brackets coming out. I've got the engine jacked up higher, and also you need to pull the bolts out, I think, to get it out. That's what I had to do. So just tilt it up or down, as the case may be. For the lower bolts, you can tip it down as best you can and get that out. And then I tipped it up and was able to get the bolts out here, there, and everywhere. And then you can see it's going to be coming out. Ugh. I'm going to go ahead and take off these bolts here and this. 12mm bolts here, 14 here. There's some tension on there, so just be aware of that. Turn this off with my hand, and then we'll take this off. And there's a washer in the back of this. There's a washer on the back side, so don't lose that. That helps it pivot freely. Sorry. So I'm working at taking the water pump out. Stubby 12mm here, and used a pry bar for leverage to break that bolt loose. It was pretty tight for me, so just broke it loose like that, and it's coming out. And there's of course a 12mm bolt underneath there, and I got that out already, so we can just take this out. And the water pump that I have is an assembly, and I'd really recommend either getting a whole assembly like this, or making sure you take this back piece off as well, so you can replace this gasket that goes back here, because you don't want really anything to leak once you take this apart and put it back together, because nothing worse than doing a job done twice. So O-ring that'll go in the middle there too. You should get that in your kit. So we're going to take the bolts we need off to get this assembly off. It's just basically 12mm bolts and a couple 14. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. It should be lifted up right through here. We'll use a pry bar probably and wiggle it back and forth, because we're going to have to pry it off that O-ring that I showed you that's on the back. That O-ring pipe setup. So we get the bolts out now, and we're just letting some of the coolant drain out before we pull it all the way off. All the bolts, I think, that are going to actually hold this onto the engine. You see, it's just draining out into a bucket. I've got a couple pry bars set up here. I'll try and wiggle it back and forth and get this water pump off of the O-ring pipe. You kind of see it down in the hole. that's what we're going to do, just wiggle it back and forth and pry this off. Actually sounds terrible. Real rough. So here's the actual weep hole on the back side. Weep hole there, and it runs down into this channel. So you'll see this little channel on the block, so that's what it's all about there. You see the channel right there. So you'll see stuff leaking out that little corner. And you do need the proper scraper. This is a metal gasket. It'll probably mostly pull off. There we go. Yes, it's metal. Still want to take a scraper or maybe some emery cloth or Scotch-Brite, something like that, and clean this up on the engine block. And you can get to the O-ring. There's an O-ring right up in here. We can change that out with our new one. And then bolt the water pump back on. So here's hopefully a good clear look of the crankshaft timing marks. Now my tensioner was actually sticky, so I had to take this apart, and you can see how it comes apart. I clean it up with some like emery cloth or something, and make it clean and smooth again. Maybe put a little bit of grease on it, make sure it slides freely so it can pivot, and you should be good to go. But that's what I would do, and that's what I found on this. Is it's a little gunked up, so we're going to clean it up and make it nice and smooth. Okay, I've lined up all the timing marks. I got my belt down here on the crankshaft, and I just wedged a towel in there so it doesn't move, and then we'll wrap it around the appropriate pulleys, and I'm going to watch out for the crank sensor wire here, so we'll get that kind of where it needs to be in the middle, out of the way, go around here. Then we're going to go up top and make sure our marks are lined up and wrap it around here, and we'll bring it around. So when you pull this belt kind of tight and it doesn't quite line up, and our marks are real close, so I think I can turn the crank a little bit to get my teeth to fall into place. We can always double check everything after, but I'm going to turn this a little bit and get the teeth to drop into place and wrap it around here, and around the water pump and back to the back pulley. So we get it wrapped around the back, and then we can go, lastly, we'll go down here to the tensioner and get it wrapped around that pulley at the end down there at the bottom. Just like that, it's wrapped around. Like the way our marks look, and we'll go down below and finish tensioning that belt. Now I don't have the right special tools. I use these clip tools, right angle clip tool to get in these holes and apply a little tension, because we're going to apply some tension first. Actually, it's about 39 inch-pounds, so it's not that much, but we're going to try and tighten this up, and then we can pull the pin after we tighten this 14mm bolt. So we're going to take this, go counterclockwise, and then apply some pressure, and then tighten that 14mm bolt. I can pull the pin, and then we can turn the engine over by hand a couple times and double check our timing marks. So I've got the new belt on. Kind of see this is almost a straight line right here going this way. Not quite. I'll give you some indication. So we're going to turn the engine over by hand twice. You got the crank bolt in here. We'll turn it over a couple times, line up our crank mark, and see how our cam marks look before we put it together. So I just finished cranking it over by hand a couple times. Got the crank lined up there. Go up top. That looks good. And that looks good as well. So at this point I'm going to go ahead and say reverse procedure to install and put everything back like you found it. If there's anything else I'm kind of forgetting or any tips, it'll follow along after this. Good luck to you. And I always try to remind people not to tighten any bolts until they've all started. So you got this bracket here, get all the bolts started by hand, including that one there. And then they're all started, I can feel comfortable with tightening them then. But whenever you're working with brackets or whatever that has more than one bolt, try and get them all started before you tighten any. Really helps get things aligned and you can wiggle things around.